Hi, I'm Charlie Collins, and this is the Donegal Sport Hub Donegal Daily Championship Podcast, brought to you in association with Kelly Centra, multi-award-winning store, Mountaintop Letterkenny, providing 24-hour service 7 days a week. And many thanks to Kelly's at the Mountaintop for their support. Kelly Centra, support them if you possibly can. We appreciate their support on our Championship Podcast. Well, it's been a difficult week and it's been a week of uncertainty, but we're here for a podcast late on Thursday evening. Gary McDaid is joining me in studio here. As you already know, there was some confusion at the beginning of the week in terms of the Senior Championship final between Kilcar and Naomh Conaill. On Tuesday evening, the CCC decided they would cancel that until Wednesday the 7th of October. They did say that the other three matches in the championship at junior, intermediate and senior level scheduled would go ahead, and as we speak on this Thursday evening, and you'll be seeing this on Friday, those games are going ahead. Announcements have been made in relation to Donegal, of course, just before we came in to record this, myself and Gary as well, and I'm sure you're all aware of them, but we can tell you that no spectators will be allowed to the games at the weekends, unfortunately. We'll talk a little bit about that a little bit later in the programme. Gary, we've reduced it down to one today to respect all sorts of stuff that's going on with the COVID-19. Thanks for coming in. We're going to start with the Senior Championship, a relegation game. It's easy to forget about that game with everything else that's happening, but it's hugely important game for Dunlow and Milford because it means that one of them is going out of Senior Championship into Intermediate and neither of them want to be there.
Aye, and it's last chance saloon, Charlie. Like, there's nothing left after this weekend. I was just looking there during the week. Dunlow are 33 years playing senior football, I suppose, as opposed to Milford's 3 years back in senior football after winning intermediate in 2017. So Dunlow won't want to be known. This team won't want to be known as the team that has taken them down to intermediate. So you would think, that there's going to be a huge rallying cry coming out of that camp this weekend. And whereas, listen, Milford they'll know themselves against Termon. That's not the Milford that played against, say, the likes of St Michael's and Four Masters, where they just didn't show the fight that they're capable of showing in so many games gone past this year and years gone by.
Dunlow, I saw them a few times during the championship and they lost narrowly on both occasions actually up at St Noel's. Very, very unlucky to lose that day. And likewise against McCool's, who we know really shook up Gweedore in the semi-finals. Kick of a ball between them that day down Dunlow as well. They had the best scoring average against of any of the teams that actually were in that bottom four, and even better than some of the teams that avoided the bottom four. So does that make them favourites going into this game, or given the importance of it, a one-off situation? And we know that Milford on their day are very capable, Gary. That doesn't count for anything now.
Yeah, the favourites thing, I'm not so sure about. I would say it's pretty even at the minute. Like, to me, it's going to come down to whatever team can get in front early, I think, because confidence is going to be low in both camps, Charlie, so it is. And, you can see if you manage to get a run in the opposition early on, you can nearly think that the confidence whoever's behind will drain further, so it will. And I just think maybe, now, Dunlow's the one team I haven't actually seen in Championship this year. I've seen the other 15, so I have. And from watching the Milford game online against Termon, I think they have a lot of learnings that they'll take from that semi-final defeat to Termon. They kind of went down the middle a while lot, got turned over a while lot, got caught then in the turnover. Termon used their pace in the turnover. Termon were down to 14 men for a time as well. They didn't press fully up in the kick out. It was 15-14. There was a huge opportunity for them there. They were 5-6 points down, Milford. They were still keeping two sweepers back at times, so they were when they knew they were getting beaten and going into a relegation final. So I think they'll have learned loads from that, and they probably had the 2-week break that'll help them as well. Milford probably had a tougher draw, like you were talking about there, that Dunlow had a better scoring average against them, so they had. Mulford definitely had a tougher draw. Dunlow played teams in and around them, the whole team. Other teams were in the relegation area and just above them. Mulford probably didn't have that luxury. Like the Glenties, they have Bundoran, St Michael's and Four Masters. Yeah. And probably most people would think, on paper, Four Masters of the team, them and Mulford's thereabouts, and they got a point out of that, and they could have won it.
They could have won that game, and they could have beat St Michael's. I was at that game, Gary. They could have won that night as well. So they were close in both those games to comfortably getting out of the situation. Will there be a hangover for that? From that for them as well?
I don't think so. I think they'll nearly take confidence from that, because if you look at what they have done in paper against the opposition as opposed to Dunlow, they've played probably teams that have finished higher up in the final championship table. So they'll definitely be looking at that this week. So listen, lads, look what we've done here. Like, we probably should have got someone out of St Michael's game. Almost beat Four Masters, still got a point out of it. I think, when they look at that, they'll take huge heart from that there. Dunlow, I think, will be really worried this week, so they will.
Dunlow had a chance against Killybegs to do it, home venue. Yeah. Killybegs hadn't been going well, and they were comprehensively beaten that day, which surprised me at the time, Gary.
Yeah, I know, like, in the last time they won the intermediate was back in 1986. I was reading during the week there against Glenty, so they're going to need to really pull out all the stops, and they've had, I think, I stated before in the podcast, out of all the teams who finished in the bottom four, they're the team that had the most chances and had the best draw going forward. So, listen, they're there because of the results, and it's no one's fault but their own. I'm sure if Mulford could have had their draw, they'd probably think they might have had points on the board and might have avoided the relegation playoff.
You give the nod to Milford then?
I think so, hesitantly so. I just think they didn't bring that fight that we've seen in Milford teams in the championship against like Four Masters and against St Michael's, and what we've seen in the last couple of years since they came up and played senior football and played Division 1 football. Like, they always bring it every day, and I'm sure they'll be deeply disappointed they didn't bring it against Termon, a local derby. Like, I just couldn't figure it out myself, so I'm going to slightly give the nod to them, and I just fear for Dunlow, really. So, or Milford, whoever goes down, I just fear, Charlie, like I talked last week, like, if you go down there, like, you could be stuck down there, like, and I would fear for the long term plan then for the club if they are down there.
Yeah. That game's in Glen Swilly on Sunday afternoon, early throw-in at 12:30. That's Dunlow against Milford in that Senior Championship relegation playoff. The winners will stay in the Senior Championship. The losers will be in intermediate football next year. Teams looking to come up to intermediate football are in the Junior Championship, of course, and already we have a finalist. Downey's beat Moville last weekend in McCool Park by 6 points. This weekend it's Convoy against Letterkenny Gales, and that match is in McCool Park on Saturday evening at 7:30. Not much to choose between these two either. Gales, disappointing in Milford and Moville that day we were down, bounced back with a good victory down in Carndonagh, which we felt, Gary, they were going to be up against it coming off that Moville game, but they went down. Kieran Cannon and Ronan Freehan got a couple of late points to give them victory, but they're going into this match against underdogs because in most people's eyes Convoy are probably the best of the junior teams.
Yeah, probably at the outset of the championship, Charlie, people look at Convoy and Downings as, because they're promoted to Division 2 last year, is probably the two teams that would be in the final. They didn't meet each other, and a lot of people will think that's the way it will end up. Like, Gales were beaten that Junior A final last year, and I don't think they're the team that they were, like, in 2019. So they're, like you talked there about Moville, like, we were shocked that day in Moville. Like, it was a heavy enough comprehensive defeat at the end of it, so it was. Yeah. They went down to Carndonagh, and granted, Carndonagh are way better than they were the year before, but like, they scraped over the line in injury time. We talked about in the podcast last week, like, two late points in injury time. Yeah. The game wasn't by no means handy for them. I just feel they're not hitting the heights that they hit last year, and I think it's going to be very, very difficult for them this weekend. What do you think's
the difference? Because the same squad of players, I know they've had players out through injury and players not available to them, but I think they've got everybody in and around now, and I'm sure they'll be at full strength for this game. What's the difference? Is it just a mental thing with them?
I don't know. Maybe they invested so much into last year, and it gave them a real bad knock of confidence, so it did perhaps, and maybe they're still not over it. They're kind of in a second season syndrome. That I started to think about that recently when I think back at the Moville game now and think back at the Carndonagh game in the quarterfinal. That's what I'm starting to or in the semi-final. That's what I'm starting to think about myself. Like, but for the positive side for Gales, I'm really thinking, they're looking at they have an extra week now. So they had Kieran Cannon and Shea Doherty. Remember, when he came back for that quarter final, they missed the Moville game, who were two of their main players, and Shea always has a big influence on the scoreboard every day. Now, I'm sure that extra week will help them as well to get whatever knocks and niggles they had, to give them an extra week of that, and also to build on their fitness. So that's definitely in their favour there. But Convoy, I just think the scales might have tipped in their favour. Anthony Brown has made his way back from New Zealand, so he has, and Anthony was in the college with us, so he has a good few of the Convoy players and the Gales players actually, so I know quite a few of them. And Anthony was a brilliant player for us in the college, so he was, and before he left for Convoy, like, he was the main scorer in junior championship nearly and Division 4, and you're able to add his name to the likes of Paddy Dolan, who was part of the senior panel there for a wee while, so he was, and also played underage, minor and under 20s, and Joe McGill. To have three boys like that who are able to influence the scoreboard significantly, I think that's going to be a huge benefit to Convoy this weekend. I think they're very strong around the middle as well for a junior team. Like, they have two giants in the middle, Raymond McNamee and Packy Mealy.
Yeah.
There's not many teams in junior football would have two physical specimens like that there around the middle who are able to dominate the skies and are actually good footballers and leaders, like the real leaders. Like we talked about, maybe Letterkenny Gales lacking that leadership. I know Raymond from his time teaching the college for a while with us, and obviously I know Packy from being around as well. Like, and the two men will not be afraid. They'll not be quiet anyway, so they want on the pitch the next day that they'll be grabbing the game by the scruff of the neck and not letting it slip away.
Gales' best performance probably in the championship was against Downings. It was a high scoring game. Downings got 17 points, the Gales got 3-8 that day. Okay, you could say 17 points, 17 scores against 11 scores, but Downings are probably the best team that they played, and they put it up to Downings and stayed with them. Maybe they play better against the better teams when there's less of an expectation on them.
Possibly, and you would see that in a lot of teams, so you would, like, and they might take a huge belief in that, and also I think they'll take a huge belief that Convoy are in lockdown. We're in lockdown until tonight. I think they're only allowed to back training tonight, so that they were out for the last week or whatever amount of days it's been out. So that hasn't helped Convoy in the build up to this year, that they wouldn't have had their players physically together on the pitch running through last minute preparations. I'm sure with the likes of Lawrence McMullen there, he would have had them on Zoom anyway, over the last week or 10 days, whatever it was, they were in lockdown. And because they'll leave no stone unturned there. Like, he's huge pedigree, he's been there for years with Convoy the last 4 years, and he's suffered the defeat in those last three semi-finals as well. Like, I mean, they lost to Red Shoes and Buncrana the last 2 years. Both of them went to an Ulster final, like, so they got beat by good teams.
They've beaten by quality teams,
it's not as if they have just slipped up. And looking at that there, you could say the same about Gales. Like, last year, Gales weren't lucky to lose to Buncrana.
Oh, they were
final,
right there
so
with Buncrana.
Like, Buncrana only nicked it.
That's the point I was making. They seem to perform better against the better teams, maybe. Anyway, Convoy.
I'm giving the nod to Convoy, Charlie. I just think that when I go through their team and go through the Gales team, I just think they have more aces.
Okay, Gary's going for Convoy in that one, and of course, if Convoy get through, they'll be meeting Downings in the final. Letterkenny Gales will have something to say about that. 7:30 at McCool Park on Saturday evening, that game is scheduled for. We're going to take a short break there. When we come back, we'll be looking at the Intermediate Championship final between Cloughaneely and A. Rua from Ballyshannon. Many thanks to Kelly Centra at the Mountaintop for their support. Rejoin us in a couple of minutes.
get your car free at DMG. It's as simple as 1, 2, 3. 1, buy a used car at DMG. 2, like us on Facebook. 3, tag your friends on Facebook.
You're welcome back, and thanks to Kelly's at the Mountaintop for their support. Gary McDaid's with me here. We're a little bit late with our podcast this week, but Gary, we've looked at the we looked at the senior and we've looked at the junior. Just before we go on to the intermediate situation, we all know at this stage now the difficulties that sport is having and life is having in terms of COVID-19 and such like. Are the government and the people in charge being a little bit unfair to sporting organisations with the restrictions they're putting on them, given that they're saying that, you know, restaurants can serve outside, pubs can serve outside, and then they're calling off matches where people are going to be outside? It doesn't. There seems to be some bit of a contradiction there.
Yeah, something I feel very strongly about, Charlie, as well. Like, you know, now more than ever, children especially, as well as adults, but even more so children, I think, need sport now more than ever. They've had a long year with very little sport and very little extracurricular activities, and we do not need to take it away from them now, because my fear is, Charlie, we're going into a 3-week level 3 here. I actually can't see us going back to level 2 for a long while. If anything, I think it'll go the opposite way. And I'm deeply frustrated, like, you know, because all those children are, you know, you're talking about there that it's mixed, very much to me, mixed messages coming from the government, the likes of NEFIT. Like, you know, they're saying it's not okay for those children to go outside and play a football match. So it's not, but it's okay for them to go inside in the classroom and mix with 30 other families that day and be in the classroom for 6 hours in a primary school or in a secondary school to mix with up to 200 families because they'd be different subjects or whatever during the day. So to me, sport should be allowed to go ahead. So it is, because it's completely contradictive, the messages that's gone out there at the minute. And I feel strongly about it, that the kids need it for their own, not only for their own physical development and to help them as well, but for their own mental development. It's going to be a long winter for them, so it is.
For sure.
And like I just think it's so unfair. And them, like, and I have a young family myself, like, and I know they'll be deeply frustrated today that they're not allowed to go out and play matches.
Yeah, well, we're heading towards a situation, it would seem, not immediately, but possibly, where only elite sport's going to be allowed. And again, you have to ask the question, well, why should elite sport be allowed and the levels below that not allowed? Again, it's a big contradiction. Anyway, I suppose we could talk about it all night, Gary. We'll move on to what we know is happening in the intermediate final. Cloughaneely back in the final after losing out to St Noel's last year. Rua back in the final again after losing out in a semi-final against Cloughaneely. Nothing between these two teams. The last 3 times they've played, 2 of them ended in draws. One of them ended in a draw. One of them ended in a very narrow victory for Cloughaneely. And this year, another narrow victory for Cloughaneely. So nothing to choose between them, Gary.
No, and was actually a draw after extra time last year. The first game in the semi-final, so it was. And it was only a late goal in the replay then.
That's right, Darren McKeever, wasn't it?
McKeever, that's right. That sneaked them through, and 2 points, as you said, in
3-12 to 3-10 this year
in the group game. Like, and I'm delighted for the intermediate, Charlie, that, you know, they're getting the top billing this weekend. I mean, they were going to be in alongside the senior, and the likes of ourselves probably wouldn't have as much time to spend about it. So listen, they're going to be the talk of the media this week, and deservedly so. And as you said, the last 2 beaten finalists, so they are. Like, I just think it's going to be a cracker of a game. I was looking at the scores, so it was like the each of them are scoring heavily. Yeah. So they are as well, and they're conceding. Like, it's not as if they're blanket defences. So they are. So I think we
just on that point, I just did a bit of research on it. Cloughaneely have scored 977 and conceded 864. So not a pile of a difference there. We've talked enough about Cloughaneely, these tight matches they play, and Rua have scored 84 points, which isn't a big return from 6 matches if you consider that 310 of that's 19 points was in the game against Cloughaneely, but they've only conceded 75 points, so defensively they've been that better. So if you break it down, Cloughaneely's average is 17.34, 14.6 against. Rua is 14 points for, 12.5 against. very little to choose between them. Cloughaneely slightly better, but not by much.
Yeah, listen, and probably looking at that, when I was looking at it myself during the week as well, that's nearly the way I see the game going, like that as well.
Yeah.
So it is. I think it's going to be a 2-3 point margin, and I think we could be in for a treat. And I think there'll be lots of people, as you said, they're not allowed to go to the game this weekend. I think lots of people will be logging in online, so they will, and hopefully it'll be the county board will be and the CCC will be happy. It could be a good day for them, for the Coffers.
Would you be concerned about Cloughaneely because they conceded 3-10 in two of their matches against Niamh Columba and against Airua during the league season? Now they got a draw and a won in those games, so you could say 3 out of 4, despite the fact they conceded 6-20 in those two matches. That is a concern, Gary.
Yeah, it definitely is, and probably, the only time I've seen them live was the last day against Buncrana, and we were kind of joking about it here the last day. I actually did feel they were in control of that game and didn't look like losing the game, even though there was very little in it at the end. And Buncrana rallied well at the end. I think they have developed and grown and matured as a team as the season has come on and as the games have come on as well. And I think having the likes of Jason McGee play 60 minutes the last day in the semi-final is absolutely massive for them. He's had now a 2-week rest again, but also 2 weeks to build extra fitness. He brings that ability of being able to hit long-range frees as well, maybe that they didn't have in their armoury before when he's unavailable for selection. Eamon McGrath is probably going to be in around the middle. So as you think that he could possibly pick Jason up, should be a great battle because Eamon's very athletic as well, so he's able to get up and down the pitch, but it's kind of important maybe for Eamon's sake that he tries and focus on his own game as well and just not stopping Jason, because a few years ago man marking was about trying to stop the opposition player, and now if you look at the top players in the game, they not only are able to stop the opposition, they're able to really hurt them
as well. Yeah.
They're really able to really hurt them and get up the pitch then when your team has the ball. So there's going to be a lot of key battles this weekend. That's going to be one of them.
Yeah. Well, they really be concerned just looking at the 6 matches they played. They only scored goals in 3 of them. They scored 5 goals in total. 6 goals in total, and 3 of them were against Cloughaneely. So that's 3 games where they didn't score goals. Now Cloughaneely have conceded 8 goals in the 6 matches they played. So Airua are going to have to think about getting those, because the goals saved them when they came in the last match against Niamh Columba. Those 2 second half goals really won the game for them that day. They're going to have to think about that.
Yeah, and probably Airua have an ace in the pack that they didn't have last year, David Dolan back. So he is, and the game I saw them this year against Fannet, he was actually injured, and they thought he might be out long term, but he came back and played last week in the semi final. He just has a sweet left peg at him, so he has, and he's in at the edge of the square, and he wasn't there last year, and you would think that's a huge ace for them to have back. And probably flicking that around, Kay McFadden, the full back for Cloughaneely, was brilliant against John Campbell in the semi-final, so he was. So it could be an intriguing battle there as well. He did very well in John Campbell in that game, but Dolan, probably a lot of people would rate him up there as one of the top forwards in the intermediate, alongside probably John Fitzgerald, and Cloughaneely are everyone's expecting him to be back this weekend. He missed the semi-final, of course, and it could be a battle here, Charlie, of the 2 full forwards. Yeah,
and the likes of Philip Patton up front and Oisín Rooney as well. I mean, they have the artillery there if they can get enough possession and open up Cloughaneely, because Cloughaneely play a pretty free-flowing game. They can get players behind the ball when they need to, because they've got a lot of mobile players there as well, but they tend to want to play an open game, and the results and the scores for and scores against would reflect that.
Yeah, and that's why I think it's going to be exciting, and there's going to be so many battles around the pitch. Like Darren Drummond was missing that weekend as well. I went to see them against Fannet. He was back, and he played full back against Niamh Columba in the semi-final. Another huge ace to have back. They seem to be getting all their players back, as do the likes of Cloughaneely now. So I think both teams are going to be at full tilt this weekend. I can't wait to see the battle of the keepers. So I can, with Peter Boyle in goals for Airua and Sean McClafferty and goals for Cloughaneely. I was really impressed with McClafferty against Buncrana. So it was he had 100% kickouts in the second half, so he did, but his kicking throughout the first half was brilliant as well. He's able to find his men, even though they're being marked, he's able to chip it into space for them. it's obviously something they put a good bit of work into. Peter Boyle as well, like I actually was managing Buncran Cup in 2008, so I was along with Martin Regan, and Peter was our keeper when we beat Tyrone in the final. So we also, like, you know, I know Peter well, like, and I remember at that time at under 16, he was able to do what no other keeper at under 16 was able to do. He was able to belt it beyond the second 65. So he was, and if anything, he's probably growing his distance. So he has, and he's able to convert frees for them as well from long distance. You know, and he really favours that long kick. So he does. He doesn't look for so much for the short, whereas McClafferty kind of mixes his up, and Peter looks for distance and tries and puts the opposition on the back foot. So, listen, there's probably, I mean, it's a bit interesting to see what way both managements approach it. I mean, because it's going to be very difficult to close off both keepers. I mean, will Cloughanilly go with the idea? Are they looking at Peter Boyle looks to favour long mostly? Like, will they go possibly and think, would we get away with 5 forwards closing off their 6 defenders here and play an extra man out the middle, because he does favour going long? Whereas probably Rua thinking Sean McClafferty is able to kind of, he mixes his up very much. We can't afford to drop a sweeper back. Which they did, Charlie, against Fanet. They didn't push up on the kickouts that day, you know, and Fanet were able to get kickouts away. So no, I didn't see the game against Nave Columba. I don't know if they changed that or not. So to me, if they do that against Sean McClafferty and Cloughanilly, Sean McClafferty got 100% in his kickouts. And I'll always go back to, like I've said here in the podcast many times, primary possession is vital. So it
absolutely.
Is. Whoever gets their hands on that ball from your kick out, you're able to get up the field. From the opposition kick out, they're not set up, so they're not.
No. Intriguing final. Who are you going to go for?
Like Rua probably. Sean Taylor hasn't played.
No.
So he hasn't. He was playing full back for them.
Big loss to them.
Huge loss. Now the word is that he's back doing bits of training. Like they thought
you can't throw him in for a final.
They thought he was going to be out for the season. They probably having the likes of Dolan back, Drummond back. Shea McGrath was brilliant in the semi-final by all accounts. So he was really pulling the strings nearly as a QB, brilliant baller. I just think Cloughanilly then. I can't wait for the battle to see John Fitzgerald against Colin Kelly. Colin, of course, was in the 2014 All-Ireland minor team that got to the All-Ireland final, so he was, and won an Ulster Championship at under 21 as well. A great man marker, but also a very tidy footballer, so he is. I can't wait to see that battle back in the full back line as well. I think John Fitzgerald, will be dying to get back, so he will as well after missing the semi-final. And last year, Charlie, he only came on in the final, so he did. Yeah. And he'll nearly feel as if he has a huge point to prove that he's missed too much football over the last 12 months. Having Jason back as well, I'm giving the nod, Charlie, to Cloughanilly.
You don't sound too certain about that.
I've seen Rua once and I've seen Cloughanilly once, so I have, and live. I've seen them once each live. And listen, I just think that Cloughanilly have better balance about them. I think after losing the final last year, it's going to really, really hurt them. They seem to have the upper hand on Rua. They haven't lost them in those 3 games in the last 12.
They've been tight, but they haven't lost.
No, they haven't lost.
No.
And I'm sure they'll be driving that home this week. And if you're in the Rua camp, there's always going to be that wee doubt. We haven't beaten these boys in the last 12 months. And sometimes when you're going behind in the game, those doubts start to increase then, so they do when you haven't beaten a team like that in the last 12 points, so we'll give the nod to Cloughanilly.
All right, Gary putting his head on the block there, going for Cloughanilly, and cracking final in O'Donnell Park on Saturday afternoon at 4 p.m, and I'm looking forward to doing the commentary on Ocean FM on that final on Saturday as well. Just to mention the Ladies Ulster Championship before we leave, Glenfin and St Knowles are both in action at the weekend on Sunday. Up in Glenfin with a 12:30 start. Just I'll emphasise that because it initially was a 2 o'clock start for the match against Lacken from Cavan, and then in the intermediate quarter final at 2 o'clock down in Mount Charles, St Knowles take on Ross Trevor from County Down. That's a quarter final. The Glenfin game is an Ulster semi-final. That's about it. We'll be back next week because, of course, we'll have to look back on what happened this weekend and see how near Gary got to getting things right, or did he get it all right? We wonder. And we'll be looking forward to Kilcar against Niamh Connell in the Senior Championship final, in the Michael Murphy Senior Championship, which is now scheduled to take place on Wednesday the 7th of October, and fingers crossed that it's going to take place. Thanks to Gary for coming in. Thanks to Tommy here at Full Tilt Studios for looking after us, and thanks to Kelly's for their support, of course, as always. We'll be back next week to look forward to the senior final and look back at all the action this weekend. Thanks for joining us. Hi, I'm Charlie Collins, and this is the Donegal Sport Hub Donegal Daily Championship Podcast, brought to you in association with Kelly's Centra, multi-award-winning store, Mountaintop Letterkenny, providing 24-hour service 7 days a week.